Hi, everyone. So excited to be here again. And emphasize again after 990 some episodes, but they never get old. And I always love being here, sharing the stage with wonderful people like Dave Snell, Charles Caldwell, and possibly Catherine Chadwick. And today's topic is money. And I was just thinking last week, 900 some episodes never talked about money, and we're dealing with LinkedIn and YouTube and AI, and there has to be a connection somewhere. Actually, I saw where yesterday NVIDIA hit a $5 trillion valuation, which is bigger than a lot of GDPs of major countries. So, with that said, since Dave's next to me, I'll turn it over to Dave. Dave can bring you a little bit up to date. And first thoughts on money, Dave.
Oh, thanks, Don. It's good to see you. I'm glad we made it this week. I apologize for last week. Had a medical appointment I couldn't miss, but there was good news because I don't have to have a hip replacement, as I told Don before the show, which I was very excited to hear that news. So good news here in Jacksonville, Florida. But happy to see Charles as well, and I hope Catherine can make it in. My first thoughts when I saw money was a little bit maybe a little different than everybody. I don't know. We'll hear from the panel. When I first retired from the Navy, everybody said, "Oh, you're going to make so much money. You're going to do so well. You're going to go do all this stuff, and you'll be rich. And your experience will translate." But I tell you, I found after the first 2 or 3 years of working, and making lots of money and being quote unquote happy, I was miserable. Just because you have money and doesn't mean you're going to be happy. It took me away from my family. It took me away from my personal goals and directions. So money is great. It can give you a lot of freedom, but it can also take away a lot of your personal direction and goals of what you want to do personally.
Yeah, well, that's a great start, Dave. I see we got Dean LeBay first in line today to comment. Thank you again for being here, Dean. It's always a privilege to have you in the audience. You've inspired me and a lot of other people, and keep rooting you on. So hang in there, Dean. And here's our good buddy Omar. Omar's just somebody you got to know if you're on LinkedIn, especially if you want to get into live streaming. And through that, Omar will introduce you to a lot of people who will introduce you to a lot of people. And they're all pretty well qualified by then. Oh, we've got Meryl here. Hi, Meryl. Great to see you. I see you're in the carousel of Leslie's also and doing a lot of you, Leslie, for providing the space for Don to share the link. Well, great. Me and Leslie are great friends. Leslie's done about plus 50 shows already with me, and we'll continue to do some more in the future. So, because I did so much on introduction, I'll move it over to Charles.
Hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where they're watching from. And it's great to be back this week. I think money is probably a necessary evil, um, but we obviously know that it's probably one of the biggest things that stops people. People have lots of stories about money that often get them stuck, um, and there's society has become incredibly materialistic. But what we do know is that nobody will take it with them.
Mm-hmm.
So money can't buy happiness, but as far as happiness goes, it's probably the one that reduces misery the most. But as we know, there's lots and lots of stories about people with money who are absolutely miserable.
Yeah, it's absolutely, Charles, because money is like anything else. It can be used for good and it could be used for not so good. They say money makes good people better and bad people worse. And it's really, I think, a lot of how you prioritize the value of money in relationship to the value of family, the value of health, the value of happiness. And if you can achieve some of those, then you're spending a lot of time with money doing a lot of things that you could have been doing without money. And there is something to being happy without money. And there's something being happy with money, and the question becomes, how do you make friends with it without being a slave to it? And to Charles's point, you can't take it with you. There's a saying, you're coming into the world with nothing, the worst you can do is break even. So with that, Meryl says kudos to Charles is joining us. No, not today. Charles is in Vancouver. But I always think that myself, Meryl. So we're always happy when Charles is in the same continent as us. Makes time so beneficial. Dave.
Yeah, I build a little bit on what you just said, Don. I think is something that I don't think a lot of us do in our bigger picture of life, career, is doing the work of analyzing, if you will, what does money mean to me? What is this career going to mean to me? What is this relationship going to mean to me? Doing some sort of analysis, self-identification to say, this is what money means to my life. I need to make this much to be happy, and this point will make me unhappy. So I can scale back, okay. But so many times we get caught up in the social dynamics, if you will, of social media, relationships with our friends, that we think that we have to chase more and more and more so we can keep up with the Joneses, if you will, at the sacrifice of our happiness. But because we haven't done the analysis to say, this is where money fits into my bigger picture. I need so much so I can be happy without encroaching on my happiness. I think building on what you had just said, I think that's all I have to say there.
Yeah, great points. Really good points. Catherine, so happy to have you. I enjoyed the post that you had about our get-together with Anna and myself, which was fabulous. And actually, it does add more layers to everybody when you get to actually meet them, see them, and spend fun time together, right? Where you're not gearing for the next answer or trying to be wittier than sometimes you should be. So thank you for being here, Catherine.
Well, thank you.
I'll get you in the loop.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because I was having trouble getting in. So the fresh link that you sent me worked like a charm. So thank you for that.
Thank you for thanking me and being on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, what's your initial thoughts on money?
Well, when you mentioned wavelength, what immediately came to mind was, what is anybody broadcasting, right? Because money is energy. And it's fascinating when you think about it that way, because we all have a history with how we grew up with money. Either it was great or it was not, or it was so-so, right? And some of those things stick with people. And I think when people can examine their beliefs about money and can reprogram themselves and say, and to what you were talking about, Dave, is, what do you want? And I think that it plays a big part. I also think that when people are coming from an attitude or a broadcast of lack, money doesn't want to come because money doesn't feel welcome, right? And so it's kind of like a friendship. Are you friends with your money?
Yeah, those are wonderful points, and a couple ideas. I was thinking the same way. So, Charles.
Yeah, I think I want to qualify a little bit what I said the last time around about money. I think that people would probably fall into different categories. I think that around the planet we still see a lot of poverty, and if people are in poverty, then absolutely, once they are able to sustain themselves and start to lift themselves out of poverty, money dramatically increases happiness by providing security and meeting their basic needs. But then does money create happiness once people are comfortable? If they have enough money to sustain them and keep them going, then probably the focus should be on creating experiences for themselves, helping others, buying time, reducing stress. But then once they are in a point where they really are sitting on a piece of wealth, if they believe that money is the ultimate goal, then money is not going to lead to relationships, health, personal growth. It's more likely going to be a recipe for emptiness, which we've already heard echoed today on our discussion.
Yeah, so true. And from the few things I've read lately about it, money is the number one reason why relationships don't work. So newly married people, they usually split up because of money. The other thing is separating money from other parts of your life. And it's really more in line with not what you want or need, but what do you deserve? What have you done to achieve it, receive it, and enjoy it? And I know when I had my business, and I mean, I was spending so much money in so many places and continue to reinvest it. And at home, I drove a 12-year-old car, lived in the same house that I was my first house, because I was happy when I had it, and it didn't change. So what did change? And the other thing is separating areas where you make investments because it's the right thing to do, instead of raise expenses, which is the wrong thing to do, because money will put pressure on you. And a certain time money is accepted, and then it becomes an entitlement. And then you have a hard time trying to figure out how to get more money when you're trying to spend it on things you never have time to enjoy. So I think it's a rebalancing and tuning in. And at a certain point, if you don't need it, help somebody else with it. A lot of my friends who did really, really well, they're working all the time, but they're working for causes, they're working for foundations, and they told me a long time ago, they would have quit a long time ago, it was just them. But if they didn't have people depending on them, and they didn't have an interest on the better good, that becomes a higher priority. So anyways, Charles comes up with, which I believe wholeheartedly, welcome, be sure to say hi and tell us from where you're watching. Stay positive, good vibes only. And that's really the way you get support. And maybe a path to money is connecting with people who are doing things that you'd like to be doing things with. Dave.
I just lost my train of thought. I will just go with a quick story. I mean, I have had several friends in the last, as I've talked about before, I just moved down to Florida after getting divorced. I haven't worked full time in a couple of years, but the last 2.5 years of not working full time have been, or were, should say, spent daily with my daughter. And that was a sacrifice I was willing to make. And people saying, well, you should be, again, as I started with, you should be making so much money. You're worth this much. And I said, well, this is worth more to me. And while I've sacrificed that by driving, moving 9-hour drive away, I still felt as I moved down, I didn't need to go back to work full time because my happiness, my needs were met for the most part. Money is always good. We're always going to have freedom from having a little bit more, from worry, from cares of, the worst case things happening. But it really came down to a mindset of, I can wait. I don't have to rush back to making whatever it was I was before I went independent. So it just, again, I lost my train of thought, but that was just the first thing that popped in my mind there. I'm just freer a little bit. I don't have a schedule. I don't have to worry about, deadlines or results. I can do what I need to get done.
Yeah, there is something to time, and usually time and money have some intersection as far as the ability to acquire more of it. Catherine?
It's really interesting. And I love what you're talking about, Dave, because so many times I have noticed, and when I was working in the hospital, I noticed Um, Many people are working overtime, just really putting in way too many hours and not being able to perform at their highest ability because of the number of hours that they're putting in. And the number of people that go, oh my gosh, I have to work all this overtime because I have to have this and I have to have this and I have to have this for my kids. And and they're wearing $500 sneakers, and or maybe they don't call them sneakers, but whatever they call them, right? And it's just like, wow, okay, and so that was I was really pleased with what I was learning at the hospital, but it's just like I can't be in this environment because this is not these are not my priorities, and this is not my attitude in regard to how I want to provide money for me. And I believe that when people are not happy doing what they're doing, they're always chasing the money.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think it's an experience that a lot of people have experienced. Charles?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Catherine. And lots of people go through that sort of daily, weekly, monthly, yearly rat race. And then at the end of it, they look back and they realize that they have actually not created those experiences, which was talking about. Once people get out to a point where they have a bit of stability in their life, they should be focusing on creating those experiences, creating memories, I guess is another way to look at it. And because now what's going to happen when people work that hard, they actually end up creating memories of working hard and not memories with family or memories with with friends and that kind of thing. And one of the thing, money is just such an all-encompassing phenomenon for people that it would be very good for people to understand what their relationship with money is. So even if they have a good relationship with money, it would be good to know that to change their financial reality. Don't necessarily focus on budgets or investments first. Start by asking themselves, what's the story I tell myself about money that keeps me moving forward or keeps me stuck? What would they be without that story? And what value can they create through what they currently have? So I think one of the great things about money is it's one of the ultimate ways to practice being authentic. If you master your relationship with money, it's a key piece of life that can create a lot of freedom for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me when I was raising my kids with my wife naturally. And what I learned before kids is I had a dog, and I always kept its food out, and it never gained any weight because I guess it knew it was always going to be there. So as the kids got a little bit older, like 5, 6 years old, I put a bunch of bowls of money around the house. Just took a bunch of nickels and pennies and dimes and just filled them up. I think maybe I got $30 into the whole process. And they were just always, hey, we have so much money, and money doesn't mean that much in a sense. And I think it got, like to Catherine's point, some people are coming from scarcity. They're coming from families who believed it was a sin to have too much money, or money was evil, or whatever you want to say. And I think once you can look at it as a tool instead of a master, that you use it when you need it, and you don't need it as much as most people, because there are going to be times when you're going to be without it, either when you get started or somewhere in the middle. Money is very transient. It comes and it goes. But one thing I know, there's so much of it, especially today. They're printing it like crazy. The key is how to get in front of something that's related to making money versus trying to get behind something that's already over. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest shifts, is how to figure which side of the street you need to be on. I saw UPS just eliminate 48,000 jobs. They're not coming back. And most of them are in customer service, right? Because AI is going to take it over. And it's happening all over. So the point is money is always going to be important. but what currency you value your money in will have a lot to do with how wealthy you become. And if you put your emphasis on family, there's a different measurement than if you look at a bank account. So anyways, not to take up too much of the money time, on to Dave.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Don, of a couple of points, a couple of stories. I remember going to a fancy dinner or fancy location. I don't remember the name of the restaurant. It was up in D.C. And there were people in there who were legitimate millionaires, multi-millionaires galore. And then, a couple of folks came in. They came in super dressed up, and I mean, not tuxedos, but the fanciest suits they could find. And my uncle looked over and he goes, "Who do you think the richest guy in here is?" We all pointed around like, "Oh, that guy, he's got the fanciest clothes. He's got this." And Joseph Abboud back in the 90s, whatever it was. And he said, no. I already know who it is. It's that guy over there wearing jeans and a polo without socks and some tasseled, Cole Haan shoes. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Because he doesn't care. It's not an image for him. It's not about the money. It's about the life. And he doesn't care." But everybody else has, and it ties into what we were talking about earlier, very early in the conversation about the social media perception that we have to look rich, and that money is where we're chasing the Benjamins, as you will, and we get focused on how we appear to others, and we lose something in the process. And I've had a lot of free time this year. Let's put it that way. And I will admit to doom scrolling on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, just kind of scrolling through. And I've seen a lot of podcasts, little bits. And it really amazes me when you go to these 20-something-year-old boys and girls, men and women, young men and women, the podcaster or somebody with a microphone will say, "Well, how much does your partner have to make for you to be with them?" "Oh, they need to make $6-7 million a year." It's just this lack of perception of what really is about money, that we think that money's going to buy everything, including happiness, and it really doesn't get you everything that you want. It just really showed me a disconnect in youth of what they really think working and how what the return is on that investment. That they really think that everybody out there, when the average income in the U.S. is like $50,000-$60,000, I think I'm even over exaggerating a little bit. Just really shows me a lack of perception of what money is about in the United States.
Yeah, and it's constantly being adjusted for not your always benefit. Catherine.
Well, the other interesting thing too is that a person's health is not dependent on how much money they have, right? I've taken care of billionaires and I've taken care of people on Medicaid, right? And so it goes back to that energetic value, how people treat themselves, and the ultimate mind diet, how you talk to yourself. And so I think that also pertains to how do you talk to your money. And I think that everything is, people, I believe, think that money is like something way over there, right? But it's actually a part of the energetic plane that each person is living in, right? And it's available to everyone. And it's how to connect with it. And to Charles's point, money does not necessarily buy the happiness. That is something that has to come from within. And I believe so many people have to learn that. I know that I had to learn it. And it is such a valuable skill to be able to, what's that phrase, make yourself happy. It's a choice, right? And some days are easier than others, but we have a choice every day. And so we have a choice every day as how we spend the money and how we are going to generate or attract that money.
Yeah, it's a pursuit that takes a lot of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And most people naturally have their own perspective and where they've been. Charles.
Yeah, I would add at this particular point that money, I think for a lot of people, money is something that they're trying to gain more of and trying to achieve, as if money in itself is the goal. But money is not really the goal, it's just a cause. I think that money is really a metric. It's a goal, it's a form of a milestone or a form of a goalpost. It's really just a metric. And it's a metric of maybe how much value people are creating in their lives for themselves or how much value they're creating in their lives for other people. But if they focus directly on money, it's probably a losing strategy. The focus needs to be on, what are they up to in their life? What are their individual goals? How do they want to contribute to people, contribute to themselves, be a more valuable person, and solve bigger problems? And it's often said, if you really want to be happy, find something you love to do, and then get someone who will pay you to do that. Would be probably the ultimate metric. But it's really just a tool for freedom. It's a vehicle. It'll take you wherever you want, but it won't replace you as the driver. And I think that that's something that people really need to understand is the psychology of money, and make sure that. I guess one of the ways to look at it would be, and this is going to sound odd, make sure that you have money, not that money has you.
Yeah, I think you make excellent points, Charles. And I've been fortunate and unfortunate to have made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, made a lot of money. And only until you go through the circuit do you understand it's not your net worth, it's your network. And knowing there's people who will back me, people who will support me, gives you more confidence and courage to do what you believe is right. Because trepidation will be the end of you. If you're afraid to do what you have to do and you should do it because of fear or because of concern that, you can't play a game if you're focused on the score. You got to play the game. And I think until you've been up and down and all around, you understand money is not what people think it is. The people who have never had it are always challenged to believe it's worth it. And the people who have had it who have never lost it would be like babes in the woods without their money, So I think it's really about how everybody around you views money too. If you have a supportive family, if you have people that are willing to save and be thrifty, that goes a long way. It's hard to be thrifty when someone else is throwing money around like it's water, or to instill discipline, especially in your kids, as to what money really is and the value. Because, growing up, you wanted money, you went to work. You had a paper route, you did lawns, but you could make money. You just had to get out and do something for it. Meryl says, we got Melissa Houston. Hi there, Melissa. Great to see you. Thanks to Meryl's invite. We're all one team here, and you're all welcome and appreciate the support. Melissa has a great show. I believe it's on Saturdays or Sundays. I'm sure Melissa's in the carousel. Check it out. I've been on the show. Melissa's been on this show. So always glad to see you. And Melissa says, I see younger adults in a different way. The youth I work with are active, productive professionals who are not looking for shortcuts or wealth as a requirement for relationships. I think there is no one perspective or behavior in any group of humans. So right, because we change and all of a sudden our needs change and some things don't work anymore for us. I think once you go shopping and keep spending a lot of money and you don't feel good about yourself or what you just did or what you have, it takes some of the sweetness out of it. And Meryl says, hi, Melissa Houston. Both so excited and honored you chose to join this mastermind conversation. Thanks to my ping. Thanks for calling it a mastermind, Meryl. Where am I? I think to Dave.
Yeah. So I appreciate Melissa's joining and her comment. It's absolutely right. I will accept that I was probably siloing a group of people that I just happen to see on social media. I do know a lot of young people who are out there working very hard, I don't know that they all have the same perception of what money can or cannot bring, because I personally have not seen them doing the analysis that I talked about earlier of what will money mean to them, and in comparison to happiness and in their long-term lifetime. Something you said, Don, I wrote down. Money doesn't define our worth, whether you have it or you don't. In the cycle that you talk about, the circuits you talked about, it's about the relationships that you have that define your worth. Money is just a factor along the way that allows you to maybe see somebody more frequently or do those things that give you more experiences. But if you have an impact on somebody on a personal level, that's worth more than if I gave them $1 million cash. Is the kind of the thought I had when you went through your discussion there, because something else I had written is you had pointed out you can't take the money with us, but the memories last for generations. The legacy, we always think about the legacy, I want to leave so much to my kids so that the legacy passes on, or my last will and testament, I got to pass this on to our heirs, but the memories are going to last much longer than the money will. The money could be lost the next week, but I'm still hearing stories from my father about my grandfather and great grandfather that I'm passing on to my daughter that will last hopefully another generation or two. So I think money is not what your real worth is. It's just something that gives you the freedom that we've talked about several times here.
Yes, so true. Catherine?
Absolutely. I think it is freedom is what everybody is looking for. I think that it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a gentleman a couple of weeks ago, and he's starting a new venture. And he said, I don't want to make a lot of money. I just want to make enough, to, take care of what I'm doing and whatnot. And I said, whoa, now wait a minute. You're starting this beautiful venture. And so why not generate, be open to, receiving a great deal of money, and then you can help more people. And he said, wow, I never thought of it that way. Right. And so I do think that there's a lot of freedom in that kind of thinking too. Right. And so that I just thought I would pass that conversation along, because I've had that conversation with many people. I had it with myself before. It was just like, well, no. Let's rethink this.
A lot of times you need somebody to tell you what you just said, that
Right.
You don't really understand what you're saying.
Yep.
Great point, Catherine. Charles?
So, Catherine, I have a question. Was he starting up a business in an area that he was particularly passionate about?
Yeah.
So would that qualify as finding something he loves to do and then getting someone to pay him for it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Because I think that this is a great example of the importance of having a good relationship with money.
Yeah.
Because if people have a poor relationship with money and they find something that they love to do and they found a way to get someone to pay them to do that, but if they have a weak relationship with money, they might be apologetic about making money with a certain business venture. And being apologetic or being ashamed of making money is probably one of the greatest ways to stumble and to trip yourself up when it comes to profitability and success of a business. I know that from personal experience. I also know that from working with hundreds and thousands of individuals through various organizations and personal development companies and my own coaching and that kind of thing, that this is an area where people can really get stuck and they can feel ashamed and embarrassed. And it's a little bit like a personal tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
And this is something that you see in countries like Australia and Canada, where if people become successful, there's a little bit of a culture of how did you do that? There's almost a bit of an embarrassment or shame when people become successful financially. Whereas in other cultures, the United States is a great example of it because of the long-held belief of achieving the American dream, that when people become successful, people celebrate that entrepreneurship and encourage it. And you see a lot less tall poppy syndrome in the United States compared to other countries. Now, whether or not they have a good relationship with money, I don't know. I'm looking at what's happening with your shutdown right now.
Well, I think you make excellent points, Charles, because, money is whatever you make it. And I think to what Catherine and Charles and Dave have said, I think it goes a little bit beyond that to receiving anything from someone, right? How many people can't take a compliment? How many people say, boy, I just love the suit you're wearing today. Oh, it's nothing. I only paid $20 for it. It's a hand-me-down. I mean, it's almost like you're discouraging people from noticing improvement and sharing those improvements. So you're cutting things off, including supply. And, you got to be able to go with the flow. How much, some very smart person, my CFO a long time ago, said, how do you ever plan for the worst? What happens if a bus hits you tomorrow? What's your plan? Right? And there's a million things that could happen that will never happen. And money is like, well, I got enough for 10 years, but I don't know what's going to happen after that. Well, you got 10 years to figure that 11th year out. In the meantime, you're sacrificing your life and your day and your time and your thought now because you'll let a fear creep in that never should have been there in the first place. And then how do you get people up and back in the race? You can't always give people their money back, but you can tell them, here's what we can learn from this. And next time we try to do this, here's what we're going to do differently. And if you don't take it personal, money's money. It's not you until you make it you. And I think that's important. You lost, well, someone made. You're just on the wrong side of it. So you weren't wrong. It's positioning, it's timing. Some of the smartest people with the greatest plans fail over and over again. Why? A weather event, an insurance event, who knows? But Charles has a comment I'd like to share. To change your financial reality, start by asking, what's the story I tell about money that keeps me stuck? Who would I be without that story? What is an empowering story I'm committed to having about money? And I think that's so important because you got to develop a vision. You got to close your eyes and see your future and believe in it. And know that everything you do either takes you closer to that future or further away. Right? Eat a bunch of potato chips all day. That's not going to get you to a bright future. I'll move it over to Dave.
Oh, I don't know that I have too much else to add here. To be honest with you, I'm hearing that we need to have it gets us freedom. We have to have good relationship with it. Sorry, my dog there. We need to think about what it is we want, or how, when we think about how, I'm trying to put together some thoughts here, emotional intelligence with respect to money, of what is it that I fear? As Catherine pointed out, the guy didn't really want to make a whole lot of money. Why not? What does he fear? What is his goal? Is he fearing that if he makes too much, he'll have to pay taxes? That'll be looked upon negatively by someone who lost. To Don's point, you make money, someone loses money. Go back to the very beginning. I mean, having an analysis, something that we don't do very well, for the most part, I won't say all of us, some of us are getting better at it or doing it, is analyzing where everything in our life fits in, because so many of us go with the flow. As we pointed out, social media drives a lot of people's actions and perspectives. You got to do the analysis. What is it that you fear about money? What is it that do you want status? Do you want worth? What is it? And again, I still believe that worth is money doesn't buy us worth. But if that's your perspective, good for you. I mean, if that's what you're going to choose. I guess I'm rambling a bit, but I'm trying to throw out a few little ideas here.
I think you threw out some good ideas, Dave.
They were good, but they were.
I really, pardon me, like what you wrote, Charles, because we do have that choice to change our money story if we so choose to. And it takes time, it takes focus, and to Don's point, have to have a vision. Where are you going? You know, what do you have your sights set on? How have you set the sails, right? And the wind may change and you have to adjust. Though, if you're looking to get to that certain point, it does require adjustment, and it's a mindset as far as, okay, I'm adjusting, but I'm still headed in that direction. And I think evaluation is critical. We've talked about that before, to keep evaluating. Is this my belief? You know, am I still inspired, by what I want to do? Am I still wanting to head in that direction? Or have I gained different information where it doesn't look so inviting anymore? And then, okay, so what is inviting, and what story am I telling myself? Because we have the opportunity to tell ourselves anything that we choose. And just because Uncle Joe, had his troubles with money, it may have been part of the storytelling growing up, what parents did, what happened in the family, though we do have the ability to change that and write our own story. And it does take perseverance. It takes, obviously the desire. And there are things that we can do to build those new neural pathways, to tell new stories, to create a different future than maybe we thought we could have, 5 or 10 years ago, or last year, or last week, right? It all depends on how we talk to ourselves.
Absolutely. And you kind of give foundation to your beliefs by how you view them and how they make you feel. So that's important. Charles?
Yeah, and I think that this is why it's so important to shatter one's story about money and be able to really understand what might be holding them back. Lots of people make money the goal, but really money, as we've said up until now, is really just a proof of value. It's just a metric. But people need to shatter any limiting story they have about money. And one thing I want to introduce the concept of financial well-being, because we talk a lot about emotional well-being and physical well-being, but money is also a form of well-being. And people need to really be able to, I guess the first step in shattering one's limiting story about money is being able to really tell the truth about what's reality when it comes to their own financial perspective. Because it's very, very easy for people to get caught up in a false sense of security. You just look at credit card debt, for example. If a person has a credit card and they've got a rolling balance that they're paying off the minimum once a month, all the purchases that have gone on to that credit card has now become the most expensive purchases that person's made, because they're paying ongoing interest on that debt. And this is one of the areas where people might say, well, I'm paying off the monthly minimum, or I'm slowly paying down the credit card debt. And they lull themselves into a false sense of security because they're doing that, when actually they may not be telling the truth about their situation. They might be in a situation where they're actually facing financial unwell-being, and that's really the thing for them to do, is to sit down and come up with a strategy on how to shift that situation to where they're in a place of financial wellness, and then go forward from there.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, especially, I had a lot of experience in restructurings, a lot of turnarounds. And you're always under the gun financially and by time. And you got to identify where's the money going, where's it leaving, and where's it not coming back. And then you got to do things pretty quickly to save the lifeboat if you can't save the boat. And in other people's life, they need a restructuring. I know during COVID, a lot of people stayed home, and they found out they didn't lose any money because they didn't have to pay for the second car. They didn't have to pay for daycare. They didn't have to pay for all these other expenses. And they just disassembled what was built over time. And to Charles's point with credit cards, it's about responsibility and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Is something you're buying that worth it that you're going to pay for it forever. And what then becomes the real cost of that, not just in money, but in concern, in taking that second job you never wanted or liked. We talked about displeasure with what you do for a living. And, you know, it's your road to chart. And the key is there a happiness along the way? And are you balancing your expenses, but also the other way? I know people have so much money and they say, I'm never going to pay more than $3 for that. You know, and if you just work backwards, you're going to run out of time before you run out of money, but you're going to spend all your time worrying about the money. And it's just a matter of saying, what difference does it make at a certain point? You're free. The other thing is your past can help you in the future. Because if you say, well, since I began, I've always eaten, had a place, and clothes to wear, what would make me think that would not continue? You know, and once you say, well, I got it covered, well, maybe it's time to focus on other areas of your life that you don't have covered, or maybe share it. You know, it's funny, you can go over somebody's house and they'll give you everything under the sun. If you say, hey, I'm short $20, everything changes, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, loan money, have money, give money. What am I setting myself up for? You're the one with the money issue, not them. Somebody would say, hey, here's 20. I don't even care if I ever see it again, you know? And I think the other thing is the value of somebody is in how they're respected. I think that Dave's point with that restaurant scene where everybody was thinking the rich people were the people who looked rich. You know, the key to it is not letting it overwhelm you. And sure, you know, there's one more thing. When I was younger, it's like I'll do almost anything for money. As I get older, there's so many things I won't ever do for money. You know, you just determine it's not a good trade-off of the time one has. And what are you learning? What are you growing? I used to tell people who came to work for me, it's not how much you make, it's who you become. Right? Because that's what you're going to take with you. The money will go and come and everywhere else. And I think that was an important point. We've got Kendra Knoll. Hello from Wyoming. I'm just south of you, Kendra. I'm in Colorado. So great to see another Rocky Mountain individual. And then Charles has one statement here. First, you must shatter the limiting story you have about money and your own worth. Raise your financial thermostat. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's very doable. Dave.
So I wrote down this little statement of building on Charles's story comment is something I'd recommend doing. You know, when I went through my personal journey, I got back into journaling because writing things down, that connection between our mind and our hand and seeing and processing what it is we're writing is write down that story. What is it that you want to gain from money? Is it I want this job to make this amount of money so that I have a plan so that in 10 years I can retire and I have so much money aside. Because that way you've made that connection, you have a piece of paper, a plan you can look at, you can relate to, because then you can look at it and go, okay, I can do the analysis, go back to that and say, what are my limiting beliefs? What's stopping me from making this happen? What decisions am I making? Is it based on fear? Is it on guilt? Is it because something else? But I have a story written down. Have it written so you can refer back to it so that you know that your decision-making processes are in alignment with that or not, but you can figure out why and change. Maybe you have to write a new story that builds on it a little bit, but keep those other ones so you can see how things have changed over time. And maybe that's just a military planning process in my head of having something to branch plan off of, because something will change. You never know with your health. You may be hit by a bus. As you say, Don, something will change, but you have to have a plan from which you can branch off of. But if you haven't done that analysis, it doesn't do any good.
Yeah, absolutely, because what you're talking about brings context to the discussion, right? And without context, you're just a feather in the wind. Catherine?
And right, a feather in the wind. And so, what's interesting in regard to the journaling, I think you're spot on, and I think that it's important for people to write those stories, to release those stories, and have a decisive replacement, right? To start building that new story. And so it's the release and the replacement that I think are both key elements to making that journaling and the thought process effective.
Yeah, for sure, Catherine. Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, I love what you said, Dave, about writing it down. I think that is such an important step forward with any endeavor when people want to achieve something. But this is it's a great way to when you have this all-encompassing concept of monkey, which for a lot of people, or money, which for a lot of people is like a monkey on people's backs. Being able to write it down, get it out of their head, journal it is such an important first step. And for that matter, for any problem, but that's a great thing to do with money. I fully support that strategy.
I was due for a good idea eventually.
Yeah. Well, you have lots of them,
You
Dave.
have a ton of them.
Well, I think, what we're demonstrating is happiness and laughter are supreme when it comes to accounting. How much joy did you experience every day? Now, did it come from money? Maybe, but a lot of it didn't. Nature is something that costs you nothing. I mean, me and Ann were looking at the moon last night. So, well, this is priceless.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy one of these anywhere, but people walk around never looking, never appreciating.
Okay.
So, one person's trash is another person's treasure, is what people say. And if you can appreciate little things, you can appreciate bigger things.
Okay.
But you don't really need to. The joy of a baby's smile, the taste of a tart cherry. I mean, you name it, you can claim it and enjoy it and feel like the richest person in the world. And I think, I've seen so many rich people who are just totally a mess in every way. Every part of their life is like, I had a cousin came over and he did really well. And he was talking about being at some guy's house in Detroit, lives in a compound. I mean, like huge. He says all the kids are in rehab. He's been through 3 divorces now, but he's rich, right? And who wants that? I said to my cousin, the richest person in the block is the person with the most love and laughter within their house, not the house that surrounds them and sometimes makes them a captive of their money. It's almost like they'd be better off without it. And we know a lot of really, really successful people got there too fast with too much and burned out. They would have been better off with a slower trajectory, with being able to embrace a little disappointment along the way, temper them. And there's nothing like being humble, and when you can reach a certain level of humility, you are starting to get on the path to riches. Dave? No?
Yeah, I know we're getting towards the end here. And, as you were just talking, Don, I said, I go back to Disney movies in my head. And I don't know why something you said triggered a memory of Pollyanna. And I can't remember her name.
Haley Mills.
Well, Haley Mills, but I was thinking of her
The
aunt.
next one.
The lady who played her aunt was Ronald Reagan's ex-wife.
Jane Lyman.
Yeah. She had all the money in the town. She was the most powerful lady around, but she was miserable and just had nothing going on for her except being able to control people in this big, huge house, and people just listened to whatever she said. But then I think of Moochie. I forget the guy who played Moochie from Disney Club. He was the poorest kid in town, but he could make his life as happy as it could be because even just rubbing a stick up against a picket fence. And then you've got Pollyanna somewhere in the middle. She's stuck between two worlds, seeing the happiness from the rainbow from a prism, but she's got to live with this miser of a woman who just is not happy at all. So money isn't the end all be all, I think, is what we've come down to talking about here. It can buy you so much, but it's not going to buy you everything.
Absolutely. Great ending point, Dave. Catherine?
I think what came to mind as you were talking, Dave, was riches and wealth came to mind. And when we are unhappy, unhealthy physically, unhealthy mentally, it doesn't matter how much money anybody has, because if we can't really enjoy the life experience that we have, what's the point? And I do think that it makes a huge difference as far as how people take care of their money is a little bit indicative of how they take care of themselves. You know, just think about people in the checkout line at the grocery store before credit cards were so prevalent, right? And some people would take their money out of their pocket and it'd be all jumbled up, and they'd toss it on and have the cashier sort it out and straighten it out. And I'm like, wow, okay. So it's almost, so many things are a mirror, or so many things are an exhibit of really what's happening mentally and physically for a person. And that's just what came to mind. I think it's an interesting point to think about.
Very, very good. Thank you, Catherine. Charles?
Yeah, I think I would end on just emphasizing that just because someone has money does not mean that they necessarily have wealth. And wealth will come from how they use that money, will come from other indicators of success, such as their family, their relationships, their own personal well-being, whether that's financial, emotional, mental. It's not necessarily all about money. Money definitely will open up options for people for the future, but it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it will give you access. It will open doors, but you need to be able to walk through them. So that's as far as it'll take you. Eventually, it's what do you deserve? What are you willing to do? And are you up to it? You can complain about not getting what you want, but have you done what it takes to get what you want? And I think, starting at the beginning and starting slow. I remember people come to work and say, I hate starting at the bottom. I said, well, you're only here as long as you want to. Start moving up. It's up to you. Learn more, do more, be more, get more. It's a simple thing. Most people are waiting. It's like, when I get it, I'll do it. Well, you may not be ready for it, and it may never come. You need to go out and get it. And I think that proactive, take initiative, take responsibility, and don't beat yourself up. Be your best friend and not your worst enemy. What was doesn't mean it will be. And you have the ability to change it. And you also can say, hey, I'm tired of hitting this wall. I'm going to try another direction. Sometimes it's your direction. It's not your effort. You're climbing the right ladder on the wrong wall. And I think, that's so important. And having people like this, having friends who you can share things with. And even going into situations with partners. Why take the whole risk? I always loved having a partner or two in anything, because I wasn't the only person looking at the ceiling at 4 a.m. thinking, what am I going to say in 3 hours? Let somebody else be thinking or knowing. Plus, there is something to having company, where things don't feel like that much of a loss if you can commiserate with someone who was part of it with you. And it's also, where do we go next? What do we do next? Too many people look back and they never get over it. The lost money is not what they lost most of. They lost their confidence. They lost their courage. They lost people's respect. And, I think that's where honesty comes in from every level of money. Be true to yourself first, and money will follow or it won't. But that doesn't mean you can't do wonderful things for great situations that don't pay you. And if you waited to get paid what you deserved, nothing would ever happen. So you do it as a labor of love, as opposed to a way of getting an income. And maybe through the labor of love, you get an income too. You never know. And I think that's the beauty of you never know. So with that said, I want to thank the panel. Been tremendous. Want to thank the audience. Very, very cool. Thank you. Oh, we got Tiffany. I want to recognize it's all about Joy Span for sure, Catherine, and that's a fabulous book too. Thank you, Tiffany.
Oh,
Good to see you. Got you right at that. Agree with you all. It's who you become through your dollars journey and life, and attract, don't chase. So true, Tiffany. You're way ahead of the curve. Love to hear more about you. So take care. And with that said, I'll close the show out. Come back in a week. We'll have another exciting topic that